afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session here this afternoon on risk management. And for those of you that were unable to join us yesterday in our session, I'd like to just give you some introductions. My name's Deanne Spar, and I'm here with Jim Lee and Blake Russell in the back. And we're from Simple Q. We're a company that specializes in consulting, internal auditing, and training for companies like yours that have adopted or planning to implement quality management standards such as ISO 9001 and AS 9120. So that's just a little bit of background on us, and today we're going to be talking about risk management, which if you were able to join with us yesterday, this was a topic or one of the new themes that's being introduced in the AS 9120 standard, or one of the more emphasized themes. Not really something new, but it's just being emphasized more. So in this session today, we wanted to just dive into that a little bit further and give you all some better understanding of that and how you can apply it to your business. And just to kind of get going here, just to kind of set the theme and set the tone of what we're going to do today in our workshop, we need to first understand the definition of risk. And these definitions you all will find when the new standard comes out. We've got the draft version, but these are notes right out of the draft version of AS 9120, and just gives you a definition of what risk is. It's, in a sense, the effect of uncertainty. And there's some things there that AS 9120 talks about. I kind of like that first note, and effect is a deviation from the expected. And we always think of risk in the negative sense, but the note here is it could be positive too. So it's something that we want to consider both sides.
Someone walked in and said, "Hey, what's the risk of walking into this session this afternoon?" And I said, "Well, the opportunity, the positive risk is you aren't going to be gambling away your money."
So in the next slide, we talk about opportunity, because in the draft version of the standard, we need to address the risks and opportunities. So for opportunity, you'll see the same type of description, the effect of uncertainty with exploitable circumstances, requiring commitment of resources. So, it helps us to think of both the positive and the negative. So if we try to put that into an example for your business, think of it as something that you would look to make a decision on. Say, for example, an inventory management software. There's risks to doing that, and there's opportunities to doing that. We heard this morning Stacy from Southwest Airlines. She talked about their risk management process and how they considered supplier performance evaluations as part of their risk management. There's risks to not doing that in your company and your system, and there's opportunities to doing that to further develop your supply chain. Another example could be your min-max inventories, what you set and what you don't. There's risks and opportunities to both of those decisions. So these are just some definitions to help us set the stage here for what we want to talk about today. In the ISO 9001 and AS 9120 standards, we do have to, as I just mentioned, address those risks and opportunities. It's right out of the gate in section 4 of the requirements. So we have to address them in some way, but here's the sticky point. There's no requirement for a formal risk management program or no requirement for a documented risk management system. So somehow we just have to be able to defend that, or we talked a little bit about yesterday in our discussion of the standard, is how we put our arms around that, how we show some evidence, or by interview, auditors can look at evidence through interviews, observations, or something that's documented in your system. So how you present that to show how you've addressed risk is up to you. So here is where it talks about in the ISO 9001 and AS 9120 standard, the specific references to risk in the standards. So you can see there's quite a list here of areas where the standard talks about having a risk-based approach in all of the clauses. So again, just to kind of go through these in summary, from the background section, clause 0, it gives some definitions, more on risk-based thinking. The one I just referred to in clause 4.4, the company is required to address risks and opportunities in our processes. And then, of course, leadership, top management needs to make sure that this is, implemented and promoted in the organization, considering the customer. And then, of course, taking actions. Once we determine what those risks and opportunities are, we can't just, leave them there. We've got to do something about them, whether they're positive or negative. Even into management review, as we talked about yesterday, that's a key consideration for management review. And then also, last but not least, when things go wrong, what are those risks? What are those risks or opportunities that we didn't consider, or things that do raise their not ugly head in the nonconformance that we need to address? So, putting that all together, there's a disciplined process, if you want to think of risk management, and we talked a lot yesterday how the structure or Annex SL of the AS 9120 standard follows a plan, do, check, act cycle. And you can kind of see that here in a mini approach with risk management. So first we got to determine, those positive and negatives. What's the acceptable versus the unacceptable situations or potential issues that could come up. Once we assess what those are, then we implement actions to address them, maybe mitigate some of the negative sides of things, or emphasize those positive benefits. Then once we do that with risk management, then seeing over time, how is that affecting us? That's what then comes back into management review, because management review is, again, that high level, summary of your system. Is it bubbling up to top management leadership of what we want our system to do? And that also includes how we've addressed risks. And then following that process over and over again, which is the plan, do, check, act cycle that we talked about yesterday. We made a note here, one size does not fit all, and that's why we're all unique. And that's the beauty of these management standards, is because we all can put our own approach, we all can do it our way. But again, if on the auditing side, we just have to be able to get our arms around it, make sure people understand it, and we can defend it. So with that kind of as the foundation, now we're going to get into some practice on how to do risk management. And I'll turn it over to Jim.
Things that I want to get at in this workshop, and this is an interactive workshop, we're going to actually work on some examples and break into some groups. And what we want to try to understand is, today in our businesses, how are we using a risk-based process, risk-based thinking? How do we, in our organizations, whether it's in the sales process or purchasing process, how are we determining what risks might exist? And this morning's discussion from Southwest, their supply chain risk management process, and then determining what are acceptable levels of risk and what are unacceptable levels of risk. So that assessment of, because we don't take action on everything, there is some level of acceptable risk. Just walking across the street, there's risk. Going out into the casino, there's risk. and what's an acceptable level of risk? And when it's unacceptable, that we take action. So, as the first example, let's go to the next slide. As the first example, what I want to do is talk about, as a group now, a large group now, how do we in our companies address risk in our business today? So as owners and leaders of the organization, what are the risks to achieving our strategic direction? What are some examples of risks regulatory compliance risks. Yeah, supplier risks. What kind of supplier risks? Well, give me some specifics.
What is their qualification? Are they certified to any standard? If not, what do you have to do to qualify them? Do they build the QL 740?
Yeah.
Compliance.
Compliance.
The other one is, do they get the certification for conflict minerals, counterfeit parts?
I'm going to put. Okay, I'll just write that. Counterfeit parts, CP.
Performance.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch there. But now let's talk as an owner, as the ownership of a company. What are some ways that they address risks in the ownership of the company? What are some other ways? Financial risks. Yes. Budgets. There's financial risks. There's budgets. What else?
Employee risk.
Employee risks.
Personal liabilities.
Liabilities. Yeah. And that goes a lot of places. So, in our companies, just use these as examples. In our companies today, using financial and budget risks is top of the list. How do we assess those risks and determine what's an acceptable level of risk and what's an unacceptable level of risk?
Your budget will be what you're going to need capital.
Yes.
Spend.
Yeah, so how much can we spend? How much can we plan based on sales, based on expected profit margins? How much can we spend either by department, as a company, from a capital investment standpoint, how much we're willing to invest in capital? And then something goes wrong, and
Also depends on what you can negotiate with your suppliers. Like price breaks for quantity, things like that.
right. So there's purchase price risks as well, and negotiations, getting it right on what a part might be worth versus what you can sell it for. Tough ones. Yes.
This one that just came up, I want to mention the name, but also we had we supplied a part, and luckily before we shipped it, it declared bankruptcy.
Yeah. So on supplier risk, there's also a financial piece.
Very interesting.
Yeah, financial stability. Yeah. Right.
It was a large company, also, it's like one day we get a letter, and we're going bankrupt, say what?
Yeah. So in the last 15 years, we've been through a couple of recessions, and the 02 time frame, 08, 09 time frame, that's not uncommon. So there's the big players that keep a pretty close eye on that kind of stuff and have resources looking at that to manage their risk. And do I put all my eggs in one basket? So from an action standpoint, we've identified risks. There's a lot of supply chain risks. And how do we manage that? How do we mitigate that? Where do we determine we need to take actions in different areas? And so that's part of our exercise that we're going to continue to go through. But I wanted to give you some ideas from a ownership and leadership of the company and achieving the strategic direction and achieving goals and achieving budgets and trying to make sure that the company is viable and is minimizing and managing risks. How to look at it from that perspective. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So what I want to do is break into 4 groups. One group's going to work on the sales process. One group's going to work in purchasing. One group's going to work in the direct shipments area, and one's going to work in the warehousing, which would include receiving and shipping. And I want you to brainstorm in your groups how you address risks in your companies today in these areas. So what I'm going to do is just say that for sake of ease, I was going to divide the room, but I think you guys can figure out where you might want to be. Who wants to be a one? Who wants to be in group number one? You're all going to participate. On the sales side, yes. Okay, so on the sales side. What about on the purchasing side? Who wants to deal with the purchasing side? Good. Threes? We got some threes. Good. And then what about fours? Okay, so I want to spend the next 20, 30 minutes. We've got the breakout areas over here. We've got space over here. Let's say ones are in the back corner, twos are over there, threes are here, fours are there. And just brainstorm. Take some sheets of paper from the easel pad, and I want to learn from your brainstorms and your businesses how you deal with risks today, how you identify, determine, and assess the risks, negative and positive, for your area that you're working on. So we want each group to go down their list and talk about how companies assess their risks. And just go down your list and share with the group what you came up with in your brainstorm.
Okay. So, even though we have many bullet points, basically the very first one is obviously for the sales team, the financial risk of the customer. Looking at it in the aspect of can the customer actually afford what they're buying. You have your Duns and Bradstreets, you have your credit report, things like that. You have history, whether you're dealing with commercial or government. So can they actually have this capacity?
So let me ask a couple of questions about just that first bullet then, assessing the financial risk of your customers. How many of you have a process to assess your customers' financial risks? And you talk about Dun & Bradstreet's credit reports and different things. So I can see records of a risk assessment. Do you do that for every new customer? And you establish credit limits. Another risk mitigation, risk management, to say, based on the credit worthiness of this customer, we're going to allow them this much credit, right? So just that first one alone is an evidence of a risk management process to any outside auditor for ISO or AS to say, yeah, in our sales process, we look at risk, we look at customer creditworthiness risk, and we assess limits based on that. We do this and that. Oh, you want to see our records? Yeah, show me your last two customers that you added. Oh, where can we see the evidence of the D&B analysis or the credit analysis that you did and what credit limits you gave them? What records can I see? Is that process effective? Is that auditable? Yeah. Can we be proud of that and take credit for it? Please do. Yes. Continue.
The next bullet talks about looking at the risk of contract agreement, acknowledging, taking a look at terms and conditions. The various behind that is you have a contract that's been acknowledged or not acknowledged, and then you go into production. So maybe have some problems down the road, and the sales team actually initiated this without getting acknowledgement. So that's one identified item.
Good.
Next item is over-promising. Sales team over-promise, but you know what? Your company is this big, but they're trying to promise this much. So that's basically another risk, and how to deal with that. Obviously goes to another bullet identified into a training mode. So that's how you deal with that risk. Flow down, special requirements. Did the sales team identify the customer special requirements? Properly identify. One example would be they didn't identify in the requirements for the customer that the packaging was actually $1,500 versus commercial pack. So that, there goes a $1,500 loss. So that's the special requirements. How do you deal with that? proper flow down, identifying it, and again, I think I saw it over there as well, is having spot checks, some person integrity, that kind of stuff. Who's got their eyes on your flow down? Next item is approving your vendor prior to sales. So dealing with the risk is how are you properly identifying your actual vendors? Can they provide the capacity that you need? Pre-screening customers. One of the things that we discussed with the group was you have an approved supplier list or restricted supplier list. Is your sales team actually utilizing this list? It's all good to have a tool, but if they're not using it. So again, management looking at this on the risk side is the sales team. You have a pulse on your sales team to be able to ensure that they're utilizing this. Guys in the sales team, number one, make sure that you chime in, guys. No problem. Next item was we identified specifics during the quote process. And once again, going to other than the special requirements, identifying specifics. And this is a huge risk if you don't identify everything that's required, whether it's you giving that to your vendor or you actually flowing that down from the customer, etc. This one could actually be used in every single bullet or every chart here. Proper training. If you don't properly train your sales team, then expect the outcome. This was identified as a risk, meeting your sales goal. You can close your doors if you're not meeting your goals, right? So, one example that I used was the balance of the scale, meaning that I'm labor. If you have a salesperson that is costing you, let's say $20,000, but they only did $1,000 in sales, I show that graph. There you go. What do you want me to do here? Inspect what you expect. So if you don't have your eyes to identify the risk, if you don't have your eyes and spot checking some of the work that the sales force is doing, then you'll never know if this team is autonomous and they're doing their own thing. But your company, if you don't have, once again, you don't inspect what they're doing, you have no idea.
So let me interrupt for just a second. For both ISO 9001 and AS, all of the AS standards, there's a requirement on the sales requirements portion of the standard that says we need to see evidence, records of a review of orders that you accept. How do you do that? What records can we see? So that's another area of risk management of, have we put eyes on what are the requirements, what are the special requirements, who bought off on this order, who accepted this order, did they have the right authority, and did they do the right scrutiny, and did they understand the right flow downs and requirements, and make sure that the rest of the organization understood and could meet those requirements as part of the condition of accepting that order. All part of the existing requirements. And we get to take credit for it as evidence because it's a requirement. We should see that today for certified companies. And even for non-certified companies, there's typically some kind of a process. And whether there's a signature on a purchase order as evidence of that, or whether it's the entry of that order by an authorized person who's done the review and puts it into your ERP system or your MRP system or your warehouse management system, whatever that software tool is, that might be your way of showing the record and the evidence that it was accepted. It doesn't go in the system unless it's been approved by the right player. So, be aware of ways to take credit for the records and the evidence to meet the requirements. Sorry, last one you've got.
Last but not least is something that's very important, especially if you have return merchandise. It's towards the end of the year, whenever you do a management review or once a year, twice a year, however many you do, is why am I getting returned? What went wrong in the process? Not who did it, but what happened. That's what we have as success.
Sorry. Alright, so just with this slide, so what we decided to do is separate the negative risks from the opportunities to kind of
the good and the bad. And so for each risk that we identified, whether it was positive or negative, we tried to identify mitigation measures or leverages when it comes to an opportunity. So on the dropship side, one of the negative risks that we've identified is that we have no control over the physical inspection of the part. In dropshipping, what you can review is the paperwork. You can review several times. You can have several separate people reviewing the paperwork, but you will never see the part physically. Therefore, your customer may reject the part when they receive it and it was not under your control. However, you're getting an RMA for something that was not under your control. So how do you mitigate that risk for your business? Well, a couple of actions that we could think of to mitigate that risk was first to ask for pictures of the product you are dropshipping to make sure it looks, at least on the picture, it looks acceptable. Granted, you're not going to be able to inspect for scratches or small dents, but at least if the product is completely corroded, or if there's a big crack on it, or if it looks like something you wouldn't accept yourself, like you can already tell in the picture and you can stop that shipment or warn your customer before they ask for an RMA. So you can ask for pictures. You can ask for a physical inspection report. If you determine what criteria you want your dropshipper to inspect on your behalf, you may want to put that list together in your purchase order for your supplier and ask them for a report on different characteristics that you want your supplier to inspect prior to shipment. That can be nicks, dents, corrosion, scratches, proper packaging, proper preservation, shelf life. So depending on what criteria are important to you and what criteria are important for the product or for your customer, you may come up with a checklist that you ask your supplier to complete and return to you prior to shipment.
So let me interrupt for just a second. So part of the risk management process, assess the risk. Customer may in the future bypass you and go to your supplier. No, that's what you're talking about.
So I'm talking about
you're talking the first one.
So there's a risk and mitigation action.
Yeah. So you ask for the physical inspection report. So you've identified the risk. You determine, hey, this is an unacceptable level of risk. So we're going to create a check sheet. We're going to ask for photographs. We're going to ask for their physical inspection reports and determine when we already add into our purchasing documents these requirements to manage that risk. Those are the pieces of evidence. Now, do I have to have a procedure for that? No. Do I need to be able to show and defend a process and the evidence and the records that we've determined an unacceptable risk and have done something about it? That's what we want to see. That's what we need to see. That's what you need to be able to take credit for during an audit.
Now, in your opinion, as a consultant, would those requirements being on my purchase order satisfy that risk? Would it satisfy
that alone, no. So just having the words on the purchase order, no.
No.
Being able to answer the question to the auditor and saying, hey, how did the sales or in this drop ship process,
So
are you managing
if you
risk?
got the pictures back and that report back, inspection report, you think that ties everything
Yes,
together?
that ties it together. We determined we needed to put this on the purchase order. Well, show me that that's effective. Because that's the last piece of the risk-based thinking process. Identify, assess the risk, determine when actions are needed, take the action, and then determine the effectiveness. So we determine drop ship, risks. We're going to take action on the purchase order. What can we see as the evidence that it's all effective and it's working the way it's supposed to?
Could evidence just be knowing your supplier, having the data on how many parts they've actually shipped to me and I've inspected and they were great?
Yes, you get to manage and assess the risk and where there might need to be a greater emphasis and focus, right? So we all have great suppliers and we all have questionable suppliers and we all have one-off, gee, this is a one-time buy or a spot buy kinds of thing. So what's the risk? How do we manage that? On the one-off spot buy, pretty important part, we might need to do that. It's part of a process, whether it's formal or informal. Documented or not, can we see the evidence that we did this and that we knew as a company that we needed to do that and have those records and make sure we got those other records back. to show that it was effectively working to manage the risk. That's the key. Knowing how to take credit for it, showing the records. We as a business, as you guys went through your exercises, you're all learning, well, shoot, we do this every day, don't we? Right? It's a matter of the auditors, and risk has been in the AS standard. It's new to the ISO 9001 standard. Risk has been in the AS standard, but how it's being looked at is a little bit different. And the risk-based thinking piece and being able to show the evidence, what you're going to battle, practically, what you're going to battle, and what you see on the internet are expectations or the gloom and doom of, oh, you've got to do this new risk register, and you got to do FEMAs, and you have to do all these, new tools, and, I want to see a scoring, and the standard doesn't say that. None of the standards say that. So, what evidence can we show? Purpose of the workshop. What evidence can we show how we're doing and managing risk today, and then when do we need to take action? And what records can we show that the process is working and is effective to manage the risk when we determine, hey, we've got an unacceptable risk here. What are we going to do about it? And is it working? Is it consistent? Are we doing it every time? And what records can I see? Good. Let's continue. Thanks.
So another negative risk on dropshipping is that if your supplier leaves evidence that you obtained the parts from him and he allows your customer to see that, your customer may eventually bypass you and go direct to your supplier. So one point was if you buy the part for $2,000 and you sell it for $3,000, and your supplier leaves the invoice to you in the package that is shipped to your customer, then your customer sees you made $1,000, off of them a 50% profit, and of course you're going to be upset. You're going to be upset too. So you may lose some control, and lose customers. Definitely lose a supplier as well in the meantime. So how to mitigate that? You may want to make sure that you ship the documents you want to have in the package to your supplier and say, those are the documents that are going in the box and nothing else. So not your invoice, nothing else. So you scrap your paperwork and you put this set of documents in the box, nothing else. You may also want to put in your purchase order that they remove all evidence of them being the shipper of the product. So if they have tape with the company logo or the company name, you may want to require that they remove all this tape and put like neutral tape, no logos, no nothing, so that your customer doesn't see where you got the product. So that would be a way to mitigate the fact that the customer may bypass you in the future. Positive risk opportunities. How do you leverage the fact that you have that your dropshipping parts well? A good aspect of dropshipping is that you have access to a bigger pool of inventory. You have pretty much access to unlimited supplies of parts. Anything on the market, you can sell. So you can have a more effective AOG service. You may offer a customer better support when they're asking you for a quote. You are able to quote this product to your customer, even if you don't have it in your stock. So that's a way to leverage the dropshipping and having access to other companies' inventory. Another positive aspect of dropshipping, another positive risk, is not carrying inventory in your own stock, not having this money tied up in parts on your own shelf, not carrying the risk of obsolescence, of shelf life, of undesirable product. If there's a service bulletin that comes out on a specific product, you're not exposed to it anymore because you don't own the product. So all of a sudden you can offer products to your customers that you have absolutely no risk with. So that's another great leverage of dropshipping, so a great opportunity. I think that one doesn't need to be leveraged, it's self-explanatory, it's the whole point.
It's great. And what's great about that is on the positive side, we identify a potential for some positive outcomes. But through our assessment of the risk, we have to take action to make it a positive outcome. So we have to take some action to maybe, hey, we're going to delegate inspection to them. Well, we require evidence of an inspection report. We might have a check sheet of things that we want to make sure that things are right and it doesn't get rejected when it goes to the customer. So we turn it into a positive and turn it into an opportunity per the term of the standard. So that's the positive outcome of it. Any questions for this group? We're gonna put these on the table after the session, and if you don't take a photo of these, shame on you. Your homework's been done. Shame on you, because this is all stuff you can use for your new standard.
The one thing that I noticed is a lot of ours is redundant with sales, which means we offload everything correctly. We're going to go by the assumption that either we're told which supplier to go to by sales, or we have an open. Obviously, there are two conditions, but we just went on the assumption that it was either of the two. Supplier approval process, do we have a recent, either an on-site audit or a supplier survey? Do they provide certifications? What are their lead times, supplier performance, on-time delivery? If they have a history with us, obviously we want to review that. What kind of warranty do they have? RMA process, again, that gets back to sales. If something's wrong, we want to have an avenue to go back. And are they a design authority? Meaning, if it's customer driven, is it their part number or is it the customer's part number? Financial, again, Dun & Bradstreet, their terms.
Let me interrupt for just a second. So the supplier approval process, current requirement ISO, current requirement in AS. We need to know during an audit how to take credit when we have a risk discussion in the purchasing or sourcing.
Well, one other thing to note, which I know it's somewhere down here, is what was the scope of the approval? Is what we're buying actually covered by the scope of their approval? They may make something that's not on their scope, which makes it a non-compliant part. Financial terms, and if there's a way to find out whether or not they're currently under acquisition or acquiring somebody, which could affect their financial, their location, which is also here, whether there's a time change that could cause an ability to respond to inquiries, contracts, break or never use again, customer service, what's their response time? Do they respond to quotes? Do they respond to inquiries for missing documentation, lead time, purchase order changes, whether or not there's a long-term agreement, what the terms of those are, terms and conditions, obviously. Outsource, who do they use? Do they do everything vertically, integrated? What do they outsource? Do they use customer-approved sources if that's required? Do they deal with hazmat material? What is their corrective action process? Do they even have one? One that I thought was really good, cybersecurity. What are their capabilities electronically? Are they ITAR? Are they control? Are they export? Are they documents? Are they control? Exports? Are they able to produce material and ship it overseas? And then obviously documentation. What do they provide with the material? Is it going to be what's on our purchase order? And the one thing that we noted that's a risk that we virtually have no control over is whether or not they're a sole source. If they're a sole source, there's no other buddy in the game. We've got to go with the risk, good, bad, or ugly.
Great. So some of the discussion about this groups. Thank you very much. Good job. So if we're going to talk about during an audit and say, hey, we assess the financial risk of our suppliers, and we talk about the Dun & Bradstreet's reports and the terms, we have to back it up and show evidence that we're pulling Dun & Bradstreet's on those players. If we don't, then we can't take credit for it and have a count, right? We need to see the objective evidence that we took action to mitigate the risk and show the records of that. On the contract side and the long-term agreement side, those are all good things that we can take credit for today. Show evidence of contracts, show evidence of our great suppliers where we have relationships and long-term agreements negotiated. And then I really like this customer service and response time. On-time delivery is critical, right? How fast they are to respond to us and how responsive are they in helping us out, 3:30, 5 o'clock at night, or on the weekends. How good are they? So managing that risk, and so what records can we see? How do we evaluate this? part of the ISO and the AS today require us to evaluate on a periodic basis our suppliers. How do we do that? This should be part of the equation, whether it's a number or a red, yellow, green, good, bad, or okay. It's not variable data where I physically see a number or they get a score of 99%. It might be a green. These 10 suppliers are green on customer service. These ones are yellow. These ones are red. Those ones that are red, where's the evidence of action? Are we going to buy from them again? Can we control that, or is it selective? Do we do less business with them because they're red? Those are the kinds of things that we want to see as evidence and records that we're following a risk-based thinking process, right? Think you can defend this a little bit better during an audit?
Okay, how would you be? We even started out in landscape mode instead of virtual. Well, warehousing, let's see, we kind of started at the back end, so with the shipping and the destination, issues that come up, of course, having a default system where all your vendors and where things are going is good, but if people become too reliant on that, then when you have your custom orders or your out of the ordinary transaction, if people slip past that, I know we've had that happen before where you just follow your fields, enter your commands, and it goes down. Some of the issues that come up, you have your local or domestic shipping, the parameters that you have for that versus international shipping, the additional regulations and paperwork. I know one of the troubles that we've come across is with your training, not having everybody trained to cover all your variables. I know we've had delays in international ship out because the one person who's gone through the hazmat classes, gone through the international shipping, if that person isn't there and something drops on our shipping desk, what do you do? So there's a risk that there's of something not leaving in timely fashion, and then how are we going to address that in the future? Shipping inspections, inspecting our products before they leave, making sure your packaging, you've got your the other issues that we came up with is third parties. How do you verify that your product's leaving in timely fashion and getting to where you want it, and you've got a third party that you're sending your material through. Storage. One of the interesting things that you brought up as far as I'll take home is you're talking about a lot of times you'll have similar products, and in your warehousing, if you've got logic dictates to me, from somebody who's processing paperwork, that I like to have everything that's alike together in my list, right? But when you get out into practicality on the floor, if you put everything that's alike together, then it's very easy for cross-contamination of your parts or products. One of the suggestions was don't put everything together. If you have products that are similar and look similar, then they should be deliberately staged, in different areas or breaking them apart. A very good, answer to a very simple problem, that comes up. What else did we go over? Unit of measures, and so we did color
coating, segregation, just different ideas for how you could break up your storage. Now, of course, in storage we have, or in your receiving, you have multiple ways that things are coming in. You have your as removed parts that have to go through an identification procedure versus items that are coming from your known source that should be pre-identified. Then you're back to your staff and their ability to match up paperwork with the product versus and as removed being able to search your IPCs and make correct product identification and tagging. Lots of areas, like I said, for risk to enter into the equation, and lots of things. It all boils down to procedural.
Right, so lots of areas where risk can come into play. And yes, you have a comment?
Well, I just wanted to add one thing that I think should go on that list, and that would be security.
Oh, security is important. Good. Let's write that down. Thanks. So based on the discussions, you can all relate to the managing the risks.
Stop what you sorry.
Right.
What was your thought on security? What way?
Yeah, so how do you manage that? And
Well, the risk of, depending on if you have a high value part, are you actually segregating your high value parts? Not that you don't want just your warehouse, but with buildings.
internal security.
Internal versus external scenarios. You have, loose orders or something like my warehouse, well security, too many windows, doors. You gotta keep your parts very small and sterile, right?
You can all relate to the warehousing issue shipping side. The key is what evidence can we show that we've determined an unacceptable risk, whether it's security or documentation or human error kinds of things, and what actions have we taken to manage and mitigate that risk? Training records, cross-training records, the segregation and how we manage the inventory, or how we might even add different kind of part numbers where we have similar part numbers and use different ones because they're too similar. We can mix them up. All things that we need to be able to talk about and know how to take credit for, and that's the key for the evidence that we've taken action and the records that we have to show that we're managing risk. So, for first question, did this workshop help you identify areas where risks exist and are managed? The second question is, how many of you think you need to do anything additional to meet the requirements of AS 9120, the new AS 9120, or ISO 9001:2015? Anybody need to do more? Okay, so now let's talk about more. I want to just emphasize, we don't have to do a formal risk management process, and there's not a requirement for a documented procedure for risk management. Be comfortable. Based on what we just talked about, you've got risk management processes, you've got ways, as long as you know how to take credit for them and talk about them in the different departments, as people getting interviewed or audited know how to talk. When they hear the word risk, they need to think about, what are the negative and positive things that we do in our business today to manage it? And what records can I show as evidence that we're managing risk? So there's some risk identification techniques. You went through brainstorming, obvious, all right? There's, the standard doesn't talk about SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, opportunity, threats. I'll talk about that next. Strategic planning and business planning. If your company does strategic planning, that's risk management. You're identifying where do we want to go in the future, how are we going to get there, what are the things that could derail us, and setting goals and objectives. That's risk management. Use that. How many of you have seen or have used questionnaires or surveys? Yeah, most of you. All right. Checklists and auditing.
whether it's internal audits, external audits, or customer audits, that's a type of risk management process that we can show records for as long as we took actions on the issues that were identified, right? How many of you have a process to deal with lessons learned from problems and carry it forward to similar processes or similar products to learn from past mistakes so that we try to minimize and manage that potential problem from occurring in the future? So some of those, some people will have that. What are some other examples of identification techniques?
I think a lot of us probably do a lot of this already within our management reviews. May not realize it.
Yes.
We started doing this a couple years ago because our consultant said, coming up, risk is going to be focused. And so we started this almost 2 years ago, and we realized that within our MRMs, management reviews, we covered a lot of it, we just weren't documenting it to the point where it could pass on it. So I would recommend to a lot of people during their management reviews, look at that as a way to possibly
Great
be in
recommendation.
compliance and maybe just tweak your documentation.
Right. So, obviously missing from here is management review records, because management reviews require records of actions that are determined necessary out of those. SWOT analysis. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. What are we good at? Let's go to the next. What are weaknesses in our organization, whether equipment, resources, facilities, proximity, all kinds of factors. What are the opportunities that we have? And what are the threats to our business? Help you identify, based on SWOT analysis, a result of this is, here are the actions that we need to take to minimize our threats and take advantage of some opportunities, how to manage and mitigate some of our risks with weaknesses, and opportunities to enhance and capitalize on our strengths.
Like a couple slides ago, when you said no requirement for documented risk management process.
Yes.
If you're showing the SWOT analysis, I know some of those slides are included.
Sure.
So, if you use any of these tools for the SWOT, or is it going to have documented
Yes.
the use of SWOT?
Yes. So the point is, we don't have to have a procedure, and what we don't have to do is we don't have to do a SWOT. We don't have to do a risk matrix. We don't have to, if we've got other examples in our businesses today that we can take credit for as it relates to sales, purchasing, the warehousing operations. So knowing how to take credit for that.
So Jim, so you didn't have any documented, you didn't have policy and procedures documented. This is how we do risk analysis.
How do you make sure it gets done every year?
How is the auditor going to audit that to convince themselves that you're in compliance?
So the auditor is going to be looking for the records. Now, one of the things that we like to coach and consult with clients when we don't have a risk management procedure, but we do have a punch list. We have a punch list of all the possible areas where we manage and identify risk and take actions in our companies. And then when the questions come up, we can look at this list and then talk about them. And the auditor said, oh, wow, okay, well, gee, I see this long list. Well, let's talk about the third one and the fifth one and the ninth one and the 15th one and the 109th one. Okay, I see it. Show me the records for these. Show me the records. Where can I see evidence that you took action and evaluated the effectiveness? Pull those examples. Process works. Do you have to have a procedures? Now, some companies do need procedures. Some companies need consistency and need a process to define, I need to do this. I have a management rep that leaves, a quality manager that leaves, I have a turnover. We need some documentation. Fine, that's okay. But I'm telling you, the standard doesn't require it. From a business practice and a risk management, we need it. Okay, put it in. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I think it will eliminate the ambiguity of whether you actually have a system
agree.
I know it's in my last audit, it was expressed to you that they're making a transit, the auditor, AS 9100C, was going from a document clause-based audit to more of a process approach audit.
Right.
So are you talking about, okay, let's look at your process and then pull the evidence from the process versus are you following each line of the clause?
Correct. So where you're going is the same. We're coming at it from a couple different directions. So the process-based audit approach doesn't use the checklist, isn't looking at document 1, 2, 3, clause 4, 5, 6, and matching it up and asking, well, how do you show me how you meet this requirement? Show me how, and then checking that off in the checkbox and putting objective evidence. Now they're looking at if you were in the session yesterday with the processes, and that's why I had you do this exercise: a sales process, a purchasing process, a warehousing process, and we added in direct ship, drop ship, because that's a significant impact to distributors in this industry. Those are the primary processes of a QMS for a distributor. So how are you managing the risk? What records can we see? And from a process standpoint, thank you. From a process standpoint, that's what we are looking at, the effectiveness and what records can we see that the process is working. If the document, so if I don't see the process consistent and working, and gee, you said you were going to do this. You told me that you were going to do it done at Bradstreet with every customer and do a credit rating, but I don't see it done every time. I looked for 3 examples and I saw 1 out of the 3. Gee, it wasn't working the way you thought it was. Is there a procedure? Is it working? How do you make sure that everybody understood, everybody in that sales process understood, followed that process? How did you train them? So now,
The evidence for the process, and we're seeing there is evidence in the process.
Right. And then from a business perspective, depending on the size of the company, on the job training might be you don't have a procedure, you do on the job training, and as long as we can see results, consistent results, the process is effective. When we don't see the good results and consistency with the results, the process is probably not effective. Do you fix it with a procedure? Not always, right? Sometimes, yes. Yes, sometimes we need a procedure for multiple. All right, so tools, lots of tools to manage risks. There's matrices that you can do, risk rankings. Failure modes and effects analysis is referenced in AS 9100C. And there's an aerospace guideline on that. Preventive actions, there's hazardous, all kinds of things. And there's all these various aerospace guidelines that talk about the processes that affect distributors and aerospace companies. These guidelines are great resources through SAE, give you a lot of insight. If you see some topics up there like direct delivery authorization or direct ship guidance, supply chain risk management that we heard about this morning, and some of these other things that we've heard throughout these last 2 days. Good stuff, good resources to evaluate if you need some help in those areas. The unsalvageable parts that Sam talked about earlier today. And simple risk matrix. What's the issue? What's the likelihood that could happen? Or what's the likelihood that it could happen, and what's the consequence? How serious is the consequence if it does happen? Could be as simple as 1, 2, 3, low, medium, high, red, yellow, green, and coming up with some way to score it and determining, hey, we need to take action. What evidence can we see that we took the action and manage that? Or, gee, this is high, but the likelihood of it happening is pretty low, so we don't need any action. Simple risk register, risk matrix. You can get a little bit more complex. Put some numbers behind it and do a score, 3, 2, 1, multiply those 3, likelihood of occurrence, the severity, and the chance that you can catch it, and come up with a score to determine, gee, when do I need to take action or not? A low score, no action. High scores, I got to take action. All right, just different tools. FEMA, you've got slides for these. There's lots of documentation on failure modes and effects analysis. Go on to the next. Keep going. Multiplying scores to get to a risk number. Keep going. risk and risk management, risk-based thinking in the standards and compliance to the requirements. Did this workshop help you? Please put that in your surveys and turn that in. We'd like to be asked back next year to speak, and if you have other topics you'd like to hear, put that in there, because we enjoy this and have a lot of fun with this, and appreciate the opportunity to be here. So thank you very much. Appreciate meeting with all of you, and thanks for attending.